The Alberta legislature got a little western on Monday evening, with the interim PC leader Rick McIver eventually being removed from the Assembly by the Sergeant-at-Arms. It's complicated how this all came to be, but I'm going to try to break it all down so that we can all have an understanding of exactly what happened and the underlying motivations for it all. PC leader Rick McIver introduced a motion, Motion 504. It's a good motion. Just listen.
Be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly urge the government to affirm its commitment to allowing parents the choice of educational delivery for their children, including home, charter, private, francophone, separate, or public education programs.
Now, I like this motion. I'll give credit where credit is due. Rick McIver has some serious foresight to know that the NDP are obviously headed down a path where they will undermine the role of parents as directors of their children's education. McIver is just trying to head that off at the pass, and good for him for finally acting like a conservative. But the NDP just couldn't leave parents in charge of their own kids, so they offered an amendment to McIver's motion. Here is NDP MLA and notable anti-pipeline activist Brandy Left reading in the amendment here.
The amended motion would read as follows. Be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly urge the government to support public education, including francophone and separate schools, while affirming its commitment to allowing parents the choice of educational delivery for their children, including home, charter, and private education programs in such instances where they offer alternatives not available in the public system.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. That amendment changes the whole meaning of that motion. It basically changed the motion from parents are always in charge of their kids to parents are always in charge of their kids unless bureaucrats are in charge first. That's ridiculous. So the PCs raised a point of order about the amendment to change the motion, because amendments that change the meaning of motions are not allowed under legislative rules. You just can't do that. You vote down the motion after a debate. You don't change it so much that you have something totally different. This amendment was the NDP way of voting against parental rights in education without having to vote against parental rights in education. It's super slimy on a good day. And Wild Rose MLA Mark Smith was having none of the NDP changes whatsoever. He rose to support Rick McIver's motion as it was originally written. Here.
I believe, Mr. Speaker, that it actually does substantively change this motion. That when we take a look at the nature of education, this is about parental choice. This is not about whether or not the government has the ability to decide whether this is substantively different or whether the parents should have the right to this kind of an educational option or choice. That's the whole nature of this motion, Mr. Speaker.
Well, apparently the right is united for parents' rights, so that's as good a place to start as any, I guess. But Speaker Bob Wenner rose to rule against the PCs. Here.
Point of order has been raised with respect to the amendment proposed by the Honourable Member for Calgary East to Motion 504. That amendment makes several changes. You've all received a copy of that, substituting just some of the points. Now, I'm advised Beauchesne 6th edition, page 175, paragraph 567, states that an amendment to a motion may seek to modify a question in such a way so as to increase its acceptability or to present the House a different proposition as an alternative to the original motion. At paragraph 578, the same book notes that an amendment proposing the direct negative of a motion will be out of order. It is argued that this is what is happening with this amendment. In this case, however, I find that the purpose of the proposed amendment is to modify Motion 504 to present the House an alternative to the original question. The amendment is not a direct negative. And accordingly, I find that the amendment is in order as moved.
Now, that might have been the end of this except for this exchange. PC MLA Richard Starkey thinks the Speaker has some explaining to do. Here.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on Standing Order 13 sub 2, which reads that the Speaker shall explain the reasons for any decision at the request of a member. And I've also received a copy of the notes that you've liberally quoted from just now. I'm fascinated and puzzled, actually, that we should have such a completely drawn-out set of notes here given to us that clearly anticipates the challenge to this motion or to this amendment. And I guess my question to you as an honourable member, my question to you as Speaker under 13.2 is to explain to the House, sir, when you first became aware of this amendment, and you must have known ahead of time in order to have prepared the notes for this ruling, which was distributed to us before the ruling was actually even made. And in fact, the amendment, our first word of any amendment, was just actually as the honourable member introduced it.
So the legislative pages, the kids who work in the legislature, accidentally distributed a pre-written copy of the Speaker's ruling on the NDP amendment. The Speaker should not have seen the amendment to McIver's motion ahead of time. So how could he have prepared a ruling unless he had known about the amendment beforehand? Did his fellow NDP MLAs let him know? Wenner, the NDP MLA for Medicine Hat, is supposed to be neutral. Doesn't seem like he is, does it? Now this is where the legislature turns into a real goat rodeo. Just watch.
Mr. Speaker, no. You made the ruling before you heard people make their arguments. That's a fact. This was printed out before people stood up in this House and made their arguments. I know, because I had it in my hand. It is in Hansard. This is not the way you run a legislature, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member, would you please sit down?
No, I will not. Not unless you reverse your ruling, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member.
I will not sit down unless you reverse your ruling.
Honourable member, respectfully, could I ask?
I will not sit down unless you reverse your ruling.
And I'm sorry, unless you sit down, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the House.
Mr. Speaker, I will not sit down unless you reverse your ruling.
Then I must ask that you leave the House now. Would you do that?
You need to reverse your ruling, Mr. Speaker.
One final time, could I respectfully ask that you either sit down or leave the House?
I will sit down when the ruling is reversed.
I'm afraid I cannot do that. I would ask that you respectfully leave the House with the Sergeant at Arms.
Now, I'm hard on Rick McIver because I think he's actually a conservative stuck in a progressive party. But his motion was a good one. It was designed to affirm parents' rights, my rights in the educational choices of my kids. And now because he fought back, the NDP will withdraw their amendment to his motion. And he said he'll apologize, although I'm not entirely sure what McIver should apologize for. And Speaker Bob Wenner wants us to believe his staff are wizards or Long Island mediums, and they were able to draft his exact ruling by anticipating the arguments of the legislature ahead of time.
I'm not exactly certain how you obtained the piece of information that you have. I was advised by my table officers, and I did make a decision.
I don't think the Long Island medium is real, and I feel the same way about Bob Wenner. I'm just not buying it. Now, the real story here isn't a partisan speaker. Gene Zwozdesky was a longtime PC Speaker of the House. He made some pretty blatantly partisan rulings. But I haven't heard about him pre-writing his rulings before any arguments were made. And no, a partisan speaker can really just be chalked up to human nature in a human-run government. I don't like it, but I get it. The real story, the story being missed here, is the extent to which the NDP will connive and scheme to deny parents' choice in education. They'll introduce poison pill amendments to motions even though they aren't allowed to do that. The Speaker will have a magic pre-written favorable ruling to NDP amendments undermining parents before any arguments were even heard. The NDP will stoop to amazing lows to undermine parents. For the Rebel.media, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid.
Thanks for watching. Click here to never miss a Rebel update. Want even more of the Rebel? Well, click here to become a premium member.